Okay, I will try it out. So welcome everybody to my talk, Understanding and Mitigating Large-Scale DoS Attacks. So I hope you all enjoy your stay at Troopers. I think it's a great conference. So just start with the agenda. We will make through a short journey through the evolution of DDoS before we start to speak about some attack types and tools in the wild. We will go through some mitigation techniques, so how to mitigate common types of DDoS attacks. What was very important for me is there are really many myths about DDoS. Okay, so if you talk to some security vendors, some well-known security vendors, I think there is sometimes the wrong mindset how to mitigate. Thank you. How to mitigate DDoS attacks. So I will try to clean this up a bit while we do some myth busting. And another important point was early warnings. Okay, how can you predict DDoS attacks? Okay, what kind of media can you use to do early warnings and something like that? Okay. So first about myself, I'm a security-obsessed whitehead. Yeah? I'm working at the German Railways, DB Systel, where I'm responsible for the network and telecommunications security. So yeah, Coca-Cola positive. As Anna knows, I'm really cola addictive, so be careful if you show me your cola. I might go for it. During my free time, I analyze malware, hunting botnets, yeah, for fun and research purposes, and sometimes for beer and pizza. As I have no sponsor, okay, every comment regarding vendors, regarding mitigation techniques, or anything you might want to step in, you are welcome to do it anytime, yeah? So, just for the records, every statement that I make during the slide or during this talk does only represent my very own experiences, okay? So, some statements may find consent, others may not, okay? I experience that often statements of mine regarding firewalls and IPS result in vendor panic, yeah? But we shouldn't care about this much. So, and last but not least, all opinions are mine and do not represent those of my employer, okay? For the scope and for the time given, I have to, resize the scope a bit, because we can talk for days about DDoS, okay? About specific attack types, mitigation techniques, and so on. So I had to concentrate or focus on major types of attacks, and also assume that everybody here is familiar with TCP/IP and the basics of DDoS, okay? So we won't be able to cover it here. Okay, let's start it. So if you look at the evolution of DDoS, okay, we don't speak about anything new, okay? DDoS is well known for years. It was covered in various early papers in the IETF. There are many considerations made. So also the first and the early tools appeared in the 90s, okay, like Teardrop and Land. So in the 90s, we had, if we talked about DOS or DDoS, we mostly talked about weaknesses in TCP/IP implementations. Okay, so in the 90s we had simple packet throwing code, but it's still working today. Okay, there were no reliable command and control structures, botnets, or something like that. So in the 90s or in the early millennium, DDoS was considered as a side effect, okay, and not as a serious threat. So that's the reason why we have a rude awakening today, okay? If you look at the most ISPs, they really don't care about security best practices, yeah? There are various papers from the IETF and security recommendations. They say, okay, prevent IP spoofing, do ingress filtering, and so on and so on. But I think the most ISPs and managed service providers just miss to implement mitigation techniques, okay? That's the reason why we have a kind of rude awakening today, and the significant growth of bandwidth, yeah, has has a huge impact on the risks and attack vectors. Okay. On the other side, we have the industry, which is still playing very reactive. Okay, so we will mention this later during the slides, but most well-known vendors still fail to combat DDoS in an appropriate way. Okay, and if you look into organizations, into very large organizations, there is still a lack of InfoSec resources, or still a lack of knowledge about DDoS attacks and how to mitigate them. So today the game has changed. Yeah, like Robert Lee mentioned yesterday, the hacktivists and Anonymous entered the game. We are facing with sophisticated botnets, utilizing hundreds of thousands of clients or victims. Sometimes these victims are not, let's say, customer clients. Yes, we are also utilizing compromised servers at powerful hosting facilities to gain more power for their attack. Okay, so what we can say today is, from today's perspective, DDoS has become mainstream. Also, the attack sizes here. If we look, but don't worry. Okay, we talk about 100 gigabit in size for a DDoS attack, which is quite a very, very huge attack. I think even ISPs will have problems to combat such kind of attack. Yeah, but the question is, what generates such kind of a huge attack? Okay, what kind of motivations are sitting behind that? As you can see here, the average size of a DDoS attack today is about 2 gigabits, but we have a peak of 100 gigabits. So if you look at the common threats and motivations, it is not surprising that attacks towards customers at data centers and hosting facilities is the most, or the leading threat in the category. Okay, but what was very surprising for me was that misconfiguration is on place 3. Okay, so that means that today's companies still knocking out themselves due to misconfiguration. I will give you an example for this. For a cloud-based DDoS provider, yeah? But it is quite surprising from my point of view that misconfiguration is still present in this category. If we go to the motivations, I think it is important to clarify that we have here, on the first place, political and ideology-driven attacks. Okay, as you can imagine, ideology or political-driven attacks have an emotional component. So that makes those kind of attacks unpredictable. Okay? You cannot calculate, you cannot do reliable early warning mechanisms, something like this, that has a very, very big emotional component in it, and we have to deal with it today. So now I think we have enough background, so we will dive into the attack types. If you go into the DDoS theory, there are 100 different types of attacks. Okay, fancy DDoS attack here, fancy DDoS attack there. But if you go into the wild and face with the attackers, you will see that there are only 4 types of major attacks. Okay, first we have the application layer attacks. An application layer attack is typically targeting the system itself or the application itself, okay? Trying to exhaust memory, CPU, and sockets, something like this. Often used with application flooding like HTTP or something like that. On the second place, we have protocol state attacks, which are trying to exhaust state tables in stateful devices like firewalls and load balancers and so on. And typical protocol state attack is a SYN flood or an RST flood or something like that, which is just trying to exhaust the state tables. On third, we have volumetric attacks. Volumetric attacks, from my point of view, are the most primitive attacks because they are simply brute force. Yeah? You don't need very much intelligence for this. You have just to figure out how you can generate the most traffic to exhaust the bandwidth of a target. Okay, so due to the fact that even if when bandwidth costs have decreased, from the attacker point of view, a volumetric attack is the most expensive attack. Okay, so that's the reason why, compared with other attack types, the volumetric attacks are decreasing. Yeah. My favorite here are multi-vector attacks. A multi-vector attack isn't actually attack itself. It's more a blend of all attack types mentioned before. Yeah. So we should, and you should, in the wild, focus on these type of attacks because these are very increasing and most difficult to mitigate since there are different attack vectors used. So when we take a look at the tools available for generating some DDoS attacks, we will see some activist tools like Loic, Hoik, and other very, very boring press F5 tools. Okay, these tools are nothing sophisticated, but just do press F5 for you, press F5 until the server goes down. So there is nothing really sophisticated in it. So, but if we go through the overview here, we will see that also benchmarking and diagnostic tools are utilized by attackers. Okay. That's the dark side of open source. Since the code base for these tools like Apache Bench and HPing, by the way, HPing is a very powerful tool for testing and generating or simulating some DDoS attacks, this code base is also used by the attackers. Okay, so don't be confused by the amount of tools available. If you look in deep at these tools, you will discover that all tools, regardless what they do, utilize same attack vectors. Okay, so we have application flooding, let's say HTTP request flooding or something like that. We have packet flooding mechanisms. Yeah, but the important point is none of those tools are exploiting vulnerabilities. We are speaking about brute force attacks. Okay, I think this is a very, very important point. When we look at HPing, it's a very easy to use tool, yeah, but very powerful. During testings and simulatings, I made very bad experience with my hosting provider, yeah, because I just fired up my VMs. Okay, say, let's simulate some DDoS attacks, and yeah, the whole hosting facility went down. It was not amusing because I just got a call, hey, what are you doing there? Our firewalls and our stateful devices and load balancers go down, and we are trying to figure out what is going up there. So you have been warned. If you are playing with HPing in the cloud, just be careful. I have added this slide since my NDA with Checkpoint expired just today. What luck. So I have made many tests on firewalls. Okay, so vendor X or vendor Y came and says, okay, my firewall, my system is bulletproof against DDoS. Yeah, so you take just HPing, fire up round about 150 kilopackets per second, and you will break every firewall in place. Okay, regardless what the vendor says, just try it yourself. Take the biggest ASA appliance, take the biggest Checkpoint appliance, and fire with a SYN flood. Okay, so in the last 4 weeks, I worked together with Checkpoint to implement some mitigation techniques, do some testings, and Checkpoint confirmed that their products were vulnerable in default configuration without additional hotfixing. Okay, so but if you go to a vendor and say your product is vulnerable, they say no, we have SYN cookie in place, we have these, we have those, but it doesn't work if you really test it. Okay, just go for your own and test it, and don't believe the security vendor. That's a message I want to transport here. So the controversy is, on one side you have HPing, which is a really brute force attack, okay, flooding the system. On the other side, we have a very smooth and very slow attacks like slow LoRis or slow HTTP attacks. Okay, when we talk about slow HTTP attacks, this is just to send an HTTP request byte by byte, okay? But never sending carriage return. So the request will never be completed, in fact, yeah? So the slow HTTP attack will try to exhaust all sockets available on the server, so which will result in a denial of service situation. Now, one might think that this is a kind of vulnerability. No, it isn't. It is standard and conform HTTP behavior. So Apache doesn't care about. You have to fix it yourself, and there are several ways to fix it. But my recommendation is such kind of slow or low attacks, yeah, are very, very difficult to fight on the network layer or on a central point. My recommendation is to mitigate such kind of attacks on the server layer. Yeah? Let's say with some kind of Apache modules or some timeout optimization on your server. Yeah?
The second time you say it's not a vulnerability, I tend to quit. It's the second time you say it's not a vulnerability, and I tend to question that. Because in my opinion, the vulnerable piece of software, and not all of them are vulnerable, are responding to one thing, which is a vulnerability. So the second time you say it's not a bug, to me it is.
I agree, but Apache doesn't. Yeah? But that's really the point. If you read the news groups are full. Yeah? So the people saying, okay, why doesn't Apache fix this, and so on. And Apache tried it, but if you dig into these timers and change this, you will get other problems and other side effects. So Apache says, go and fix yourself. Yeah? But I totally agree with you.
Okay, we've had Microsoft say for years before they changed their policy, moronic things about security. Oh, it's not really a vulnerability. It's not because the vendor is shit about security that we have to get his words for the bug map.
I think so. Yeah. So if you use slow LoRa's, for example, just to show an example, you can target a server and say, okay, find me the best timeout values to keep the server busy. So LoRa's will go through, test the timeout values for you and say, okay, I recommend you this timeout value, for example, 230 seconds. The really nasty thing is, if you are under attack, okay, you won't see anything on your server first, okay? You have low CPU, you won't see nothing in the logs. Since Apache doesn't log incomplete requests, you won't see the slow LoRa's attack in your logs. Yeah? So that is really something that makes admin crazy. So as we now talked about those attack types, yeah, I think it's now important to cover the mitigation techniques. So what can we do to prevent such kind of attacks or mitigate them? Prevention is, I think, the wrong word for this because in a DDoS matter we can only talk about mitigation, not prevention at all. So this is a very, very primitive picture how a scrubbing center works, okay? I built in this slide just to illustrate what is a best practice approach to doing scrubbing or DDoS mitigation. Yeah? As I mentioned before in my slides, the mitigate and respond slides will be covered from a very large enterprise perspective, running its own AS with a wide range of dynamic applications, okay? So if you only have static applications or streaming sites or something like this, you can Akamai's, yeah? Or you can use other CDN and you are fine. But that's not the reality. That's not the real world scenario, okay? Today's applications are very sophisticated. You need backend communications. You have SOA structures and so on. So you can't just rely on static applications. So if you look here, we have an example of a dual-homed customer. Okay, so what happens here in a case of attack is the traffic and only the traffic for the attacked IP address is off-ramped. Okay, off-ramping is a standard term in the DDoS mitigation world or in the DDoS world. So what is done here is the traffic is redirected through some kind of threat mitigation device. Okay, we don't speak about some firewalls or load balancers or any let's say legacy security devices in place. We speak about purpose-built solutions and purpose-built hardware to counter DDoS. Okay, so what happens here? The traffic goes through the mitigation device or the mitigation solution, is cleaned and scrubbed, and then piped back to your infrastructure. And in this case, we are talking about on-ramping. Okay, so we are off-ramping the traffic to clean it and on-ramping back to the normal routing path. That's how a scrubbing center, regardless where you look, is working today. The first question in counting DDoS is make or buy, as always. Yeah, the first question of the CFO will be, okay, do we have to build up stuff and knowledge and something like that, or can we just buy it? I think it's an almost religious question. Yeah, and my opinion is that you have to do it your own, because if you have a very complex infrastructure, cloud-based solutions or managed solutions often, not always, but often don't really fit your needs. Okay, so if you look at the approaches of cloud-based solutions, we're always using two kinds of approach. Okay, we have a DNS-based approach where they act as a DNS server and using reverse proxies for your applications. Yeah, so the customer is connecting, or the attacker is connecting to the reverse proxy, and the reverse proxy is connecting to your site. But just imagine there are several issues with it. Okay, just think about SSL certificates. Would you like to give your cloud-based provider all your SSL certificates? Is it legal in the EU? Yeah, or in Germany? So that raises some legal questions. And the second is the BGP-based approach. Yeah, so like Prolexic does. So they off-ramp the traffic to their data centers, scrub it for you, and pipe it back to you over a GRI tunnel or a leased line or something like that. But this raises the same issues. Okay, if you think about data protection or something like that, I think this raises really, really major questions. Another point is, if you use cloud-based solutions, this is my personal opinion on it, you are going for a single point of failure. Okay? If you read on the press last weeks, there was a major outage of Cloudflare, okay, taking down round about 800,000 customer sites. Yeah? So if you remember my slides before, as I said, misconfiguration, yeah, was on place 3. This major outage here was caused with some kind of misconfiguration running into a Juniper bug, okay? But we will cover it later on. If you go in deep, you will see that there is no buy-only or a make-only solution, okay? You have to team up with your ISP. So speak with your ISP and set up your ISP to counter volumetric attacks. Okay, you have to shape down a kind of volumetric attack to an appropriate bandwidth that you can handle it. But you have also the make component. Okay, one have to build up stuff. Really, it is a very important component. If you try to handle this without in-house knowledge, you will fail. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. What is also very important is visibility. If you try to counter DDoS attacks or any kind of those attacks without gaining visibility or analyzing your traffic during normal operation, you will fail. Okay? So my recommendation is go for NetFlow, collect NetFlow information, watch out for unusual traffic, and learn how your network works. Okay? Where your customers came from. analyze geo-IP information, and all stuff like this. And the important point is you have to team up. Yeah? Establish some kind of link or mitigation plan with your provider. Team up with them, because without involving your provider, your ISP, it is very difficult to counter DDoS. So if we take a look at the must-have countermeasures I have collected here, we will see that those kind of mitigations or mitigation techniques are not implemented in today's security devices or legacy devices. Okay, so if you take a look at these mitigations, can you imagine to do something like this with your legacy devices, with your WAF, firewall, or load balancer, or any kind of device you have today in place? It won't work. Yeah? That's the reason why we need purpose-built hardware, which can do for us flood detection and mitigation types, okay? TCP policy-based blocking, for example, enforcing timers, enforcing that a specific amount of bytes has to be sent during a connection is being established, just for example, to prevent slow attacks. We need application-level rate limiting. Yeah, this is very, very important to rate limit HTTP requests, DNS requests, and all application layer stuff. And last but not least, this is very important, you need DPI capabilities. Okay? Sometimes one type of mitigation alone doesn't work. You have to combine them. Yeah? And this is where a purpose-built device comes in, because maybe you will do some geo-IP filtering on your load balancer. Okay, you can do DPI on your IPS, but you don't have a scrubbing center with a purpose-built solution that can do all the things together. Yeah? And that's the important point. And in some point, you have to go to really in the payload layer, for example, to filter, let's say multivector attacks or something like that, because packets or packet-based authentication or geo-filtering won't work always, okay? So sometimes my colleagues, as I showed them the presentation, said to me, okay, why didn't you list black holing? Yeah? From my point of view, black holing isn't actually a mitigation, okay? At least from the customer's perspective. If there is coming in 100 gigabit DDoS, an ISP can black hole the customer, okay? Everything is fine, but the customer is dead. So it's not mitigation. Yeah? And that's the reason why I didn't include it as kind of mitigation. And if you look at all these countermeasures, I think it's really clear why we here need, why we will need purpose-built equipment, okay? So I have shown many attack types and the mitigations and so on. And now you may ask, okay, you are talking about purpose-built solutions. What is it about? Okay, what is a purpose-built solution to counter DDoS? So I don't have any vendor affinity, okay? But don't hesitate to talk about vendors doing bad or talk about vendors even doing good. And my experience was very good with Arbor Networks, okay? Those guys are focused on combating DDoS. They build purpose-built devices, which is hardware-based and placed on-site in your data centers or on your, let's say, on your upstream. And important point is that Arbor follows a best practice approach, as we mentioned before, okay? They can off-ramp traffic for you. They do BGP announcements, off-ramp the traffic for you, clean it, and pipe it back to your infrastructure, okay? The important point is you don't have to redirect all the traffic. Just imagine you have a 10 or 20 gigabit internet connectivity, yeah? And during a DDoS attack, you are really under pressure, okay? It is not a practicable way to redirect all the traffic. So you need to redirect only the attacked, traffic for the IP address attacked only. Arbor is teaming up with many ISPs worldwide. So we have established a global threat measurement system or global monitoring system, which we call Atlas. And Atlas is getting feeded by about 300 ISPs worldwide. So they built up some kind of signal intelligence to detect global activity, botnets, darknets, and something like that. And what I can say about this solution is it works. Okay? And that's how a mitigation console has to look like. Yeah? So as you can see, you have several types of mitigations here, or let's say countermeasures. Okay? Depending on your attack, you will struggle with it. You will activate some of them, you will deactivate some of them, and it is depending on the attack type. But without such kind of console, or such kind of countermeasures in a purpose-built device, okay, it is very, very difficult, or let's say impossible, to counter DDoS. So when I talk to vendors or other customers, ISPs, I find there are very, some kind of epic myths. As I mentioned before, one thing is that people or vendors tell you, okay, my firewall and IPS can protect against DDoS. No, don't even try it. Okay? So regardless what vendor says, go into a POC, just test it, it will fail. The other thing is that CDN providers like Akamai came to you and say, okay, we will solve all your DDoS problems, just Akamize your site and all the problems is gone. Yeah, if you have only a static site, if you have a streaming site, non-dynamic content or something like that, this will work. Yeah? But it's not a real-world scenario. Okay? Last but not least, we have ACL automation. Okay? When I talk to some network geeks, they say, okay, I don't need a purpose-built hardware. I have my geeks, I have ACL jogging, I have my edge routers, and I push scripts. Okay? So if you remember the outage of Cloudflare, Cloudflare did exactly that. Okay? We have such kind of threat analysis running that analyzes an attack and profiles it, and such kind of script is generated for this specific attack type. Okay? So the Cloudflare outage was caused, let's say, by a Juniper bug. Okay? The profile script outputted let's say, an attack mitigation script which tried to catch all IP headers with a size about 90K. Okay, there is no IP packet in the wild with 90K, and as the script generated this profile, and the profile was pushed to all Juniper routers, by Cloudflare, they went down, in over 20 countries or 20 data centers. So ACL jogging, as I call this, doesn't work, okay? And will lead to misconfiguration and will lead to outage, and you will knock out yourself before the attackers can do. When we talk about early warnings, it is important to understand your position in the community, your position in the society, okay? From a business perspective. It is clear that ordinary press and ordinary news doesn't work for it, okay? So you have to join some kind of information sharing alliances, like FS-ISAC, like IT-ISAC or something like that, because those guys won't talk to others which are not member of any kind of ISAC group, okay? So what I can really recommend is join such groups, it is worth, and you will be able to exchange and get links to other companies and business who have the same problems with you. And you can go for sure that if you talk with somebody about your problems and your pains and so on, it won't go to the press, okay? I think that is a very, very important point. Another point is use social media. Yeah? It's unbelievable, but Twitter is awesome. Yeah? You can detect some shitstorms with Google alerts or Twitter before we, let's say, before the attack really starts, okay? But you need some kind of intelligence. You need people they care about, they do research, okay? Configured Google alerts to detect Pastebin leaks, yeah? If you go back in the past, most of the largest attacks, yeah, were announced. We were announced, but not just started and were rare, they were announced. So this is very, very important to cover this. So that was it from my point. Are there any questions?
First of all, when you said about the most common attack types, what about intentional criminal intent, basically blackmail? Is that of any relevance from your experience?
No, not really, because the attackers are concentrating or focusing on the brute force type attacks because it is the simple way to get success.
No, that's what I mean. The goal or the intention of the attackers is it's. I've had a couple of customers, but you don't get any remotely reliable numbers on that. I've had customers who have had denial of service attacks during peak business times and subsequent blackmail attacks, or successful blackmail.
Okay.
Does that play any significant role to your experience?
No, not really. Not really. Maybe for other companies or something like that, but in the years when I combating DDoS and playing with DDoS and mitigation techniques, I didn't experience it, to be honest.
Okay, another one. When it comes to monitoring, what I've found potentially useful if you do proper network monitoring on the target machines, on the victim machines. What is sometimes even helpful is just watch the number of open sockets and for how long they open and how much traffic is going through there. If you have a properly set up monitoring just for regular whatever work what you use your monitoring for, even that can provide you some insight what is going on and that you actually have a problem. So just the pure number of sockets, how long they are open, you can actually catch a number of these attacks, to my understanding.
Yes.
So yes. That's one of the points to actually start with. You should have most of the infrastructure out there anyway. So just adding these checks is just a very simple way to get some information that helps to diagnose what's going on.
Yes, I totally agree with you. So you have to implement, let's say, several defense lines, okay? It depends on your infrastructure. So if you have a web farm, for example, or something like that, it makes sense to implement such kind of monitoring, yeah? But if we talk about brute force attacks like Zyn flooding, yeah, maybe we will break some, the first line of defense, let's say your firewalls, IPS and something like that will break before they even get to your servers. So you have to do monitoring on several lines of defense.
Yeah, that's true. Please.
You mentioned that Arbor was successful in beating some of the attacks. Can you give us some numbers, how massive they were, what bandwidth was used or whatever, how many watts, I don't know. Anything to get an idea of what's behind that?
Okay. A second on that. I wanted to ask the same, as I know there was some, you were involved in cases on Christmas. We can turn off the camera if you want. If you want to share details.
The specific thing, just getting an idea of the amount.
Okay. No, I think it's okay. Let's say about 2 gigabit, and just to have a number. Yes, about 2 gigabits. And just to give you a number, we have analyzed the attacks from the application perspective and found about 9,000 different browser agents, user agent strings. Okay, so that means that the attackers are spoofing or generating their own user agents. But during our attacks, we have, let's say, about 2 gigabit attack and about 10 or 20,000 bots involved.
And those were somehow announced, at least the one that I know of. So you had the kind of early warning, like they told you in advance, okay, we are going to attack you.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
In 5 days, you're going to die.
So an anonymous guy goes to Pastebin and says, okay, let's, for example, the German railways throw one of us out of a train because he wears a mask. Okay, so that is a typical trigger, as I mentioned before. Yeah, watch out for Pastebin, watch out for any kind of anonymous Pastebin or anonymous pasting sites. Those guys are announcing. Yeah, they want publicity. They want to gain focus on what they do. They want to do it in the dark. So it is a good way also to watch out for these kind of announcements on the internet.
Please. Yes, please.
It's another story with this thing of blackmailing, what was mentioned by many. I think blackmailing happens. I heard about concrete things from politics. But anyway, there someone just operates in the dark. So this is another story.
Mm. As I mentioned before, I didn't experience it yet. So I'm only here talking about things that I really experienced myself. Okay, so if you go in the DDoS theory, we'll find several hundred types of attacks. But the 4 types I mentioned before, I think is the major pain of the industry today. Yeah.
Any other questions? There's a gentleman. Yeah, Philippe.
Regarding testing. Testing of anti-denial of service protection has been to us a very funny area of work. What's your experience with that? Especially with the providers, actually, like Prometheus.
Just to get the last sentence, can you repeat it, please? Sorry, a bit louder.
Yes, what's your experience, personal experience with testing of anti-denial of service providers?
Hard to say. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the cloud and I won't become friends. Okay, so to be honest, I don't trust them because I know from my perspective how hard it is to mitigate application layer attacks. Okay, when a vendor X or Y comes up and say, okay, I will handle the whole DDoS thing for you, I say, okay, it is even difficult for me when I know my applications and behavior in detail to mitigate it, and it is kind of not realistic when a vendor tells you, I will mitigate every type of attack for you, okay? So I didn't do a comprehensive testing of the cloud providers. I just don't use them.
Actually, it doesn't matter if it's externalized, outsourced, or if it is your own. The thing is, we're not about believing or having opinions here, we're about managing network security. And when you tell about managing, quality is done by testing. So whatever, if it is external or not, the goal is not to have an opinion, but to have hard facts and data. So in this perspective, I mean, what's your point on this area? How is the testing done from your end? How do you actually go and say, okay, is this really holding denial of service attacks?
Okay, you mean for a cloud-based solution?
No, just your own. If you do your own, then you have to test it to say, did I invest 200K of equipment plus procedures and etc. for a good reason, or is it worth less?
It's for a good reason, of course, because if you do testing, you will see that the data sheets are data sheets and marketing driven, yeah, and do not reflect the reality. I can always recommend to invest in testing your equipment, yeah, testing your DDoS protection or security measures is always worth it. So that's my personal experience, okay? In the past, there was many many times I trusted the vendor. Okay, the vendor said, okay, the firewall can handle 300,000 connections per second. No, it can't. It can't even handle 100,000 connections per second. Okay, so if a vendor comes and says, okay, my anti-DDoS protection can handle, let's say, 40,000, 50,000 bots per second. Okay, then you have to test it, and it's always worth it.
Yeah, I think the question was in that direction when you implemented this facility in your company that actually was able to prevent the DDoS attack. How did you test it after you implemented it? How did you do that?
Okay, so we used traffic generators, for example, capable of generating 10 gigabit stateful traffic, capable of simulating 4 million clients. And you have to spend much money to do comprehensive testing. Yeah, we are talking about 200, 300K about invest to test such kind. But you can go another approach, okay? You can go to a cloud-based approach, as I mentioned before, fire up 100, 200 VMs in the cloud and just start HPing, okay? But as I mentioned before, be careful, yeah? Most hosting providers aren't amused if you fire up such kind of DDoS simulations. It is amazing, but it will even break huge hosting facilities.
Okay, then I have total different experience. We've done that numerous times. We've never, ever been detected or reported or contacted, even when we had friends internally managing the networks. We never, ever had one hosting provider like EC2, like Soundtrex, like all of them. I said everyone who accepted a credit card, we rented VMs. We did the DoS testing. We never, ever had a single one which said, and the kind of simultaneous traffic we were doing, we're up to 40 gig. Never a customer asked us for more than 40 gig.
Maybe I should use your provider. Okay, interesting. Okay.
I can share actually Adem's or second. Maybe the difference is in hosting versus cloud. We have some systems sitting in hosting environments for this exact purpose, and for we do a lot of load testing. Like I mean, over the years we have identified those to work with well, and where we have say close contacts. But we had quite some trouble in the past once we ran stuff getting either. They detected it on their own, the hosting, or say somebody from the customer who actually engaged us but didn't know about this. I mean, the lack of communication within the customer. Contact the hosting provider, like, oh, we are getting it back from a. So a hosting provider got back to us, what's going on there, and if we are engaged by them, they should know, obviously. But we have all seen. We've seen different types of actually hosting facilities contacting us for this stuff.
How long was the testing period? Like, for how long have you been sending traffic?
Usually, say a day or so.
A day, okay. Day. Okay. They want to test for a day.
It depends. I mean, it's of the type of test. Usually, it's just it's not necessarily say attack testing, but like, okay, we have the new application with a backend, and then we put in some data and some forms, and it generates a PDF. So which load can it handle? This works like, okay, you start when you have some prepared custom scripts, and then it's like 200 simultaneous clients, and they tweak the database, and you go on with 500, and they tweak another, and then it's 1,000, and so then we have, in that case, we have lots of. In the past, we had like, oh, what's going on there? We see all types of say HTTP traffic.
But maybe we should have a beer later on. I'm very interested in your bulletproof hosting providers, so. They were ignorant. Okay. Great. So yeah, please.
This non-technical line to deal with vendors that make promises, and that's basically contact your company lawyer to make sure whatever they say in their fancy glossy things, that you can actually hold them responsible for problems.
Becomes part of the contract.
Yeah. That's it. One thing I found out useful, figure out what the damage would be and ask them how much they charge for a simple penalty clause in the contract, and see how much the price goes up. That tells a lot about their products. Seriously, it helps. If you're big enough to deal with them at that level, that can be very, very, very helpful. It's just not an entirely technical problem, so you should just try to...
I agree. But we don't have it only on the DDoS matter, we have it overall. It's an overall problem, I think. But just imagine, okay, you are sitting in your office and all the lights going red because you have a DDoS attack, okay? The CSO, CFO, and CXY, whatever, comes to you and says, you have to solve the problem now. You have to solve it. And you don't have time to establish contracts, do some kind of negotiation. You say, okay, there is somebody who can help me, just give it to me. You put it in place, you mitigate, and that's it. If you have the chance to a long-term plan, I totally agree with you, okay? But in most cases, this is incident-driven. You have an incident and you have to react.
Okay, it's incident-driven, you're screwed, yes.
Please. I have a question concerning ACL automation. You mentioned that it doesn't work, but you didn't really give a reason. You just mentioned an instance where there was a bug. So why do you believe that this ACL automation can work?
Okay, so there are many reasons why it won't work. Okay, so just imagine you have kind of, you need some kind of profiling. Okay, you need to profile and analyze the attack, gain visibility, and see, okay, what kind of blocking mechanism I can implement. Okay, so. Just think about the spoofed attack. Yeah? If you have a spoofed attack, probably when there are 10 or 20,000 bots involved, they will probably use the entire IP space. Okay? So if you have an automated script that profiles this attack, it will throw out an ACL that will block the entire internet.
No, it will only block the traffic coming from these compromised hosts to you.
But they can spoof their IP addresses.
Or whatever, Peter, there would be 10K entries, which will break.
It doesn't work. Even if you take, just for example, if you take, let's say, an RSR 9000 router, from Cisco, for example, and say, okay, I have here such kind of SYN flooding with spoofed, you will get probably 2 or 3 billion ACL entries or ACs. So you can't push that on your router.
It's a pity that nobody of these providers of such solutions is present, because I assume they would have something to say about this. I'm not so familiar with these systems, but I think it was not convincing to me why they could not work.
Yeah. Okay. So my experience was, if we tried this, as I mentioned before, with ACL jockeying and profiling the attack, we run into several problems, misconfigurations, knocking out yourself, and so on. And that's really the reason why you need some kind of centralized and a purpose-built solution. Yeah, but that's just my experience, because as I mentioned before, if you try to profile such kind of attack, you will block the entire internet.
The thing is very dangerous, because you have to understand fully the attack and what's going on in order to make a precise ACL protection out of it.
Yes, but you can't do it manually. So the automation is the problem. Yeah. Yeah. Please?
Yeah, so thanks so far. If what you're discussing there, if you combine it with insight into the attack, what you're saying, your analysis, and if you're lucky, there's like a certain signature to these packets. If they're the same, it's an assumption. So if some of these packets are the same, you can go for that behavior, like it's always a certain length, or there's a certain field populated, instead of going for the ACE with the IP addresses. Because your assumption in this answer is we're hitting an ACE with only IP address source. Yeah, and if we say, okay, this is the packet length, or there's another value that's interesting, like a certain GET request, and we can block that, that could help.
In my opinion, no, because of such kind of attacks. Okay, if we are facing with multivector attacks, there is not such kind of layer 3 or layer 4 signature. You have to go deep, and you have to combine several mitigation techniques. This routers can't handle. Just for example, you can't do any kind of payload regex on the router or something like that. You can say I have layer 3 information, I have layer 4 information, that's it. Or packet length and something like that. Yeah? But you can't look deep into the packet to make sophisticated mitigation of the attack. This is personally my experience. I tried it often to handle it with ACLs, run into several problems, knocked out myself, and say, okay, get rid of it. We will need a purpose-built solution. Yeah? Maybe, as I said before, some statements may find consent, others may not. This is my personal experience, which I made during fighting and combating DDoS, and I won't give this purpose-built solution away for any router-based or ACL-based solution. Never.
Okay. Any more questions? Yeah, yes, one.
Are there any news in regard to the checkpoint bug? I followed this tweet, which means that the checkpoint diamond support new.
Okay.
And the SK they provided, and this was saved, and it was started in October 2012.
Yes.
Any news on that?
Yes. I just talked yesterday with the chief engineer on this, and we have agreed, okay, I'm going to make a publication. Oh, don't. I'm going to. And they said, okay, just give us 1 day to validate if they are vulnerable, and they committed their firewall releases before, I think, R75 are vulnerable to such kind of attacks. If you do not special kind of optimization, like multi-queue drivers, IRQ optimization, and something like that. Okay.
Thank you very much, Adem.
Thank you.